If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
I'm a first-generation Filipino American. You don't always feel you're a part of the country you live in. It's this weird middle space sometimes that you have to live inside of. But when you meet others that are also living in that space, you'll learn to know that it's its own unique space too.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very special guest, a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement plan specialist, and president of National Pension Partners, Max Culiet. Max, tell me what you do at National Pension Partners.
Well, Nick, we help successful small businesses and professionals put together retirement plans that provide them the maximum retirement benefits and big tax deductions at the same time.
Well, how do you do this?
Well, we get on an internet conferencing system with the client. We review their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then put together strategies to help them in implementing a retirement plan that benefits them, not everybody else.
Well, that sounds really good, but how much does this cost?
Well, it's really not bad because the first consultation is free. That allows us to go through and discover whether this strategy works for that business and for you as the business owner and helping you maximize your retirement.
Well, Max, how do we get this free appointment?
It's really pretty simple, Nick. You can either go to our website below or call us at 877-252-1692, and then we can set up a time with either myself, Nick, or one of our other retirement plan specialists, another CPA or advisor in the office to go over this with you and make sure it fits for you.
Hi, my name is Lewis Haupt. I work with National Pension Partners, and I work with businesses to allow them to put the maximum away that they can for themselves and to save taxes.
Hi, I'm Brad Coyle, and I'm the brokerage manager at National Pension Partners. We're always analyzing plan fund choices in order to ensure the participant's success.
If you want more information on how we can help you and your business put more money away in a retirement plan than you ever thought possible, contact us at the website below or call us at 877-252.
All right, folks, it's another edition of the radio show with Mark Lee on a Tuesday afternoon. Yours truly has had a quiet day here in Durham, North Carolina. It's been a little bit on the milder side. We've had some cold days, but it's definitely been on the milder side on this particular day and all in that space. just had folks come from the apartment complex. They make that monthly visit to make sure that no critters or other things are around or in that kind of way. But we always have some great conversations here on the network about all kinds of amazing guests, all kinds of amazing folks, and all in that space. And I've got two amazing folks that have joined me on this particular day. So I'm going to bring both of them in, see the different things that they've got going on in their life and what's happening in their world, and all in that kind of feeling. So I'm going to bring on first Pamela R. Haynes and see how she's doing. How are you doing, Pamela? And glad to have you as one of my guests here on the network. And I know that definitely here on Pod TV, we love having amazing guests that are doing amazing things and all in that kind of space. So I know a lot of folks will be wondering about what's happening in your life and some of the things that you're involved in. And of course, we've got another guest as well. So always glad to have some amazing folks joining us here on Pod TV, which is kind of like taking the internet by storm, because we're doing a lot of innovative things and are basically being like an internet television network and all in that kind of space. So definitely for those that are watching on the global community, they would love to know about Miss Haynes. I'm sure that folks are sitting there going like, got to find out about these amazing people and what they've got going on in their world. So if you'll share a little bit about what you've got going on, and then I'll bring in our other guests as well, because we always have amazing conversations here on Pod TV.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, glad to have you. Definitely glad to have you. A lot of things have been going on in the world, and I know that a lot of folks are very much concerned about what's happening in the world, and definitely the whole way that things are happening in this space and all in that way. And I know that you are also a podcaster yourself as well. So I just wondered if you could share a little bit about your podcasting journey and how you have enjoyed the world of podcasting.
Okay, well, I was an author first. So I'm an author of 2 books. And the first book here is called Loving the Brothers. I wrote that back in 2018 to mark a milestone birthday. And then in 2020, I started part 2, which is called Loving the Sisters. And that book was published last year. So that book is out here too, and it's called Loving the Sisters. So in between, I was trying to find a publisher for my books. I wanted to be traditionally published. So I was on that cycle of trying to get an agent, trying to find a publisher. And I also thought that I wasn't really landing the big media attention. So I've always craved to be on BBC radio. And I thought, well, rather than sit down and wait to be invited, why don't I start my own thing? So on the 8th of March, 2021, I started my podcast, and I wanted to highlight self-published authors from around the world. So my podcast is called the Author to Author Podcast. I can't believe that I'm about to start season 5. And I've got 43 episodes under my belt already. I'm really enjoying receiving brand new books when they come through, which I offer to my listeners as a competition prize. I'm just really enjoying the journey. I've got sponsorship from a Caribbean tea company called Dalgety Teas, and they pick up all the fees associated with trying to get the podcast produced. And they also do some amazing flyers that are attached to my podcast. I'm now on 13 different platforms with the podcast and 3 radio stations. So it's been an amazing journey over the past 2 years.
It definitely sounds like an amazing journey. It also sounds like a very much journey similar to this Pod TV network, because Nick and Kim actually founded this network because they were frustrated by some of the ways that they were not getting some of the things talked about in the mainstream media and all in that space. And I was able to resonate a lot because my parents had had a similar experience back in the late 70s when they decided in around 76 to form a radio station because they were not hearing enough jazz, not hearing enough blues, definitely not hearing enough conversations around minority issues and things of that nature. So they decided to form a radio station. And like I said, Nick and Kim actually met at a hackathon and were wanting to hear more conversations about things that are very important in society, like fiscal literacy and definitely generational wealth and a number of other things that they didn't feel were being talked enough about in mainstream media and all in that kind of way. And it sounds like you've had a similar journey there in the UK and in that part of the world. So I was just wondering, one, how is it over there? And has that been the way that things have been happening even in other parts of the country that you are from?
I think for me is that I wanted to be traditionally published from the beginning, and I started on that treadmill. And what I discovered is that there's a lot of snobbery in publishing and also discrimination as well. So because my books, I'll show you the covers again, they feature Black people on the covers. There were three things that they didn't like about my books. They didn't like the cover. I mean, I love it. This is an oil painting. The Love in the Sisters is a watercolor, but they feature people who look like me on the covers. So they didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that my protagonists are all Black women as well. And to the point where they asked me if I was willing to change one of the characters and make them non-Black, which I refused to do. And they didn't even like the name of my books, Loving the Brothers and Loving the Sisters. That was something that they wanted to change as well. But unfortunately, there were my three non-negotiables. I refused to change the title, the cover, and to make one of the characters white. And I stuck it out for 2 years, looking for a publisher for Loving the Sisters. In that interim period, as you know, George Floyd was murdered, and the repercussions of that was felt around the world. All of a sudden, we had publishers opening their doors saying, we don't get manuscripts from Black people. Where are they? We've always been here. I'm a part of I would say a collective of Black British authors who are out there who have been writing for a number of years, but there was always so many hoops for us to jump to be able to land these publishing deals. So I would say that there are probably authors in America who probably resonate with my story. All of a sudden, people were coming out the woodworks offering help. Some of the help, comes with a lot of conditions and a lot of hurdles that they want Black writers to jump, that not necessarily their white counterparts have to go through the same kind of struggles. But I'm glad that finally I found a publisher who was willing to take a risk with me and get my books out there, and they're doing incredibly well. But that's in a nutshell has been my journey so far.
Yeah, it sounds like it. When did you first know that you wanted to be an author and be in the creative space and all in that kind of way?
I think it stems from childhood. I was always in the library. I was starved of trying to, find Black authors for me to follow. As a young adult, I really liked Terry McMillan, Buchi Amacheta, Andrea Levy. But I suppose writing a book has always been on my bucket list. So whenever I went anywhere and I saw someone who was an author, the first thing I would say is, oh, one day I'm going to write a book. Had no clue what it was going to be about. But in 2016, I met a woman who had just published her book. And I said what I normally say, one day I'm going to write a book. And she said, well, keep in touch. I'm moving into publishing. Keep in touch with me and, we'll see if we can get it done. And we did 2 years later. alongside the 9 to 5, looking after my family and everything else, I managed to get the book out 8 weeks before my milestone birthday. So I'm really pleased with that. She was quite driven. She acted as my book mentor during that space, because I'm used to writing court reports, appraisals, taking notes at meetings, but you're recording facts, because I used to work for the probation service. So we were often asked to write reports for the magistrates and for judges at the Crown Court. But obviously you have to write the truth. But to move into writing fiction, called on a lot of different experiences and skills that I just didn't possess. So I was very much guided by her on how to start off. And Loving the Brothers is here now, and so is Loving the Sisters. I'm writing my 3rd book at the moment, which will complete the trilogy. So I've definitely got the writing bug now.
What's the 3rd book going to be?
The 3rd book is called Loving the Children. So Loving the Brothers, I introduced 3 women who meet and marry the Morgan brothers, but things aren't quite as they seem, and the women plot to leave the brothers on the same day. Loving the Sisters is about what happens afterwards and how the women support each other. And Loving the Children looks at the impact of domestic abuse on even the unborn child until, it follows them all the way to adulthood. So that's what I explore in the 3rd book, and that will complete the trilogy.
How much of your own experiences, even in the courtrooms and everything else, got you into this space of studying and wanting to write these kind of books? I do know that some of your work was in the field of domestic abuse, and I do know that that is something that is very prevalent, not just here in the United States, but unfortunately around the world and all in that space. So I just wondering how much of your own personal experience, because I also know that you are a survivor, have you brought into your creative writing?
Yeah, I mean, personal experience, 0, but professional experience, I was a senior probation officer for 26 years. So my overall experience of working in the criminal justice system stems to over 30 years. And one of the major roles that I really enjoyed doing was working with men who had been sentenced by the court to complete the domestic abuse program. So I was always on the receiving end of hearing their stories and listening to what their journey was like that led to the commission of the offences. And I loved those light bulb moments when it just appears as though all the lights came on and they finally understood that they needed to change their behavior. So half of the program was looking at what the issues are, and the second half of the program was about equipping the men with new skills of how they can conduct themselves in their relationships. So I found that really rewarding. It wasn't an instant fix, so it wasn't something like after 6 weeks and that was it. These people were suddenly reformed. The program took over 18 months for them to complete, and it was really hard work. So one of my characters is a senior probation officer, very much like me. My middle character, Charmaine, is a mother stressed out with twins. And my final character is Rose, and Rose is in the church. And she's torn between her loyalty to the church and her loyalty to her husband. So it explores where abuse takes place. I wanted to demonstrate that domestic abuse can happen to any woman at any time, in any situation. The church isn't immune. And I suppose that's why the books have become really popular. I describe it as the Real Housewives of Atlanta meets Greenleaf meets This Is Us. So there's a lot of going back to the past, looking at the future. So it's got like a spiritual element to the books as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely, that spiritual element is very important. Everybody thinks that they have a book in them, a great novel, or something that they can actually put out there. I know that that's one of the thoughts that a lot of folks have. And I'm just wondering, as one that has worked with a lot of independent writers, do you feel that we do a good enough job of telling our stories? And does everybody have a book in them? Because I know that sometimes folks will say that, and then some folks will be like, I don't really have a book in me. Maybe a slight magazine, but not a full book, or maybe a work of fiction as opposed to a work of nonfiction. But what are your thoughts about this notion that we all have a great
Well,
book in
yes, I do think that everyone has a story to tell, but I also believe that we should be writing our own stories as well. So I've met somebody recently who had a stroke, and I was encouraging her to maybe write about the journey. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want to publish it and for it to be made public, but you can certainly be on a healing journey in terms of recalling what happened, how it felt, how you were supported, who was there for her. So we've got a working title called Letters to Her Son. So she's going to write it as though she's writing to her children, and start her journey from there. And I've always said to people who, like me, who walk around saying one day I'm going to write a book, you don't need a fancy computer, fancy laptop, or software, pen and paper, and just get your story down. Everything else, in terms of editing, can come at another time. But it's important that you at least get your story down. There are many people who would have wanted to write their books, and they just didn't have the courage to do so. So I really do want to encourage your listeners. You don't need anything flash. Pen and paper will do. I'm surrounded here by notebooks. I'm always jotting something down, jotting ideas down, and what that maybe cost me £2 to buy in the shop. And start your writing journey just for yourself. Doesn't have to be for everybody else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of times, particularly during this COVID pandemic that we've been through and everything, a lot of folks decided that they wanted to make the great escape and go to other countries or other parts of the world. And I know that part of your roots are also Caribbean roots. And I do know that that is almost common for folks from Caribbean and even some of the African nations to go to London and some of the English countries. So I was just wondering, this notion of people being expatriates from whatever their original countries were, and how that even played in your own narrative. Because I do see a lot of folks, including one of the shows that we air here on the network. The gentleman is originally from Houston, was in the military, and I think he's now currently living in the Korea that we like, and all in that space after he had spent some time in Bali. But I was just wondering your thoughts around folks that are contemplating moving to another part of the world.
Well, it's interesting because Loving the Brothers is based in London. I don't know if you recall, I said earlier, I did like literature by, people like Maya Angelou, Terry McMillan. There's loads out there. And whilst I loved those books because that's all that we had access to, I really wanted to bring a Black British experience to my writing, because there is difference. There are cultural differences, and we're not all monolithic. We don't all think the same. We don't all act the same. So my books are based in London. My 3 characters are from London, but they have a reason, because I don't want to give out any spoilers, to travel to Jamaica. And my books are part based in London and part based in Negril, which is, I would say, southwest of the island.
Right.
And I was trying with one of my characters to give everybody the experience of what it's like to get on a plane for the first time, to travel for the first time as a young adult, and how she experiences everything, how she copes with the heat, the mosquitoes at night. I wanted to give that kind of level of detail, sitting on the veranda, trying out different fruit, etc., and how different it is from her upbringing in London. I definitely wanted to bring a flavor of what the Caribbean is like as well, because we're very often misinformed about what the Caribbean is like. And certainly my experience of traveling to Barbados is definitely different to what we were told at school. We were given the impression that the Caribbean was a very impoverished place, that people lived in mud huts and straw huts and flies everywhere, and that certainly wasn't my experience when I traveled at 12 years old and was able to see things for myself. It meant that we could challenge teachers when they were trying to portray the Caribbean in a particular way. So I do encourage people to travel as often as they can. Do not be limited to where you grew up, but have experiences outside of the country and see how other people live. So my knowledge of in terms of the world is quite vast because I've had the opportunity to travel.
And that opportunity to travel is always very important. I know a lot of people like to have that opportunity to travel, get out there and see what's going on in the world. You actually mentioned earlier about that monolithic thought pattern. I know a lot of times folks will think that if you are of African descent from Britain, that you're going to think the same way as those that are from Africa or African Americans and all in that space. But we know that that is not oftentimes the case. And sometimes there can even be divides even within our own diaspora and all in that space. So I just wondered your thoughts around that, because I do know that sometimes people make stereotypes and assumptions based on where folks are coming from. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Which is why I suppose another reason why the books have become popular with people is because I do expose them to how we live here as Black people as well, and the kinds of opportunities we're able to exploit while we're here as well, and our experiences in terms of how we face discrimination. I'm writing Loving the Children at the moment. And I've talked about, the prison service being overpopulated. I would say 99.99% young Black men, closely followed by young Asian men. I've spoken about harassment by the police. So one of my new characters goes on a date, everything went well. On the way back, the car is stopped by the police, and the harassment that the driver gets, these are real things. I can't tell you that I'm not immune because of the job that I did. We also face discrimination and racism in London, and I've decided that I will include, quite a poignant event that happened in 2011, where a young man was shot by the police in Tottenham. And I've decided to include those events in my book because, we just can't be, we are influenced and impacted by what happens around us. And unfortunately, his death caused loads of uprisings across the country. And, they call it rioting. I call it uprising across the country. And I felt that it was my duty to tell that story and to include it in my book as well. So whilst we have similar experiences, we're not just shaped by what happens in America. We're shaped by what happens around us here in the United Kingdom as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to bring in a couple of my other guests as well. And I see that a couple of them have arrived and all of that. And a lot of them are in that advocacy space as well. So I was just wondering if you could talk about the importance of advocacy as I bring in Deborah, because I know that Deborah has done a lot of work around advocacy and even advocacy in the sense of domestic violence and also a lot of other things in that space. So Deborah, if you share a little bit about your story, and I've got another guest that I want to bring in as well, but I'd love to hear from both of you the whole notion of how important advocacy is in the creative side, because I know that one of the things that you got in terms of some of your own stories is even dealing with battered women syndrome and some of the things that women go through in that side. And I do know that a couple of the things that I read in social media, we're talking about the cute side of crazy, and some folks will probably be wondering what that's all about as well, and also the Healing Heartland experience. So if you want to share a little bit about that, I'm sure folks would be very much interested in knowing about it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. And the first question was like, what are my name is Deborah Bebo, by the way. I'm from Canada. And I really feel that it's so important for people to advocate. But the first person for me was to advocate for myself. I was I don't like saying the word victim because it takes all the control, but I was involved in a domestic abuse since I was married. I left that. And then I actually was sexually assaulted, and I was treated so poorly by the police. And where I live in Canada, discrimination happens very on microaggression. And I thought, when the officer came and treated me so poorly, I realized how, if he could do it so easily to me, I needed to speak up and say something for everyone else who their voices are silenced, or no one will believe them. I had to speak up for my brothers and sisters. So I decided that that's just not going to work for me. I ended up going to the local news and filing a formal complaint against the officer. I had no problem. Growing up, I grew up, if something is wrong, you stand up and say something and make a change. Instead of just complaining about something, you make it 3 solutions, and then there's always someone higher up if somebody's not going to listen. So I made a formal complaint. They still didn't do really anything about it. So I went to the police, or went to the local news, and we changed laws and how domestic abuse and rape calls are first handled by the police officers, because there was no protocol. But I really feel that being your own advocate, being your own hero, really is important, even if it's just telling somebody, and also having somebody to say, I believe you. What can I do? How can I help? Instead of, oh, you should do this, or you should have done that, or, going to someone trusted. And those are such important steps. Within the journey of being my own advocate, it happened from me. So there's a lot of power in saying that, because now I'm a published author in a wonderful book, an anthology called Sacred Hearts Rising, Sparks of Light. And I told my journey about, it was called Choices and Forgiveness, and everything in life is a choice, and how I chose to truly, utterly forgive myself for not knowing what I didn't know, but also the officer who responded so badly, and then the person who sexually assaulted me. I was able to take my story into my own hands, in my own pen, and write. And that's when I really started writing poetry and realizing, wow, art helps me to heal. And I decided to become certified in all the aspects of healing that helped me. So I'm NLP certified, I'm timeline therapy coach certified, level 3 Reiki certified. Everything that helped me to heal, I became certified in, so then I can teach other people. So the Healing Heartland is something that came to me in a dream, where we heal from a community, because it takes a true community to heal and to help each other and to realize that we're not that different. I ended up being a part of an incredible healing journey through Native Counseling Services of Alberta. And I learned through the Indigenous way of healing, through ceremony, smudging, praying, community. And that's how I truly healed my heartland. So I created this non-for-profit. It's still in the works, because I feel that it takes community to help heal. But it's art, healing through art, which is articulate, reframe, transform. So art can be anything. Art can just be talking right now. Art can be creating a website. For me, it's painting, it's journaling, it's poetry, it's anything that you can create and think in your mind and make it happen. So truly being an advocate for yourself. I ended up having a mental psychosis throughout this whole endeavor. I was hospitalized for a month, and it just gave me a factory reset. And that's why the cute side of crazy. So nobody really knows how much work it takes to stay on this cute side of crazy, but I'm here to tell you it's possible, but it's through meditation. It's through conscious effort. Crazy is a good thing. However, you have to rein it in a little bit and have outlets through art, through articulating, through coming on podcasts like yours, and being able to be a voice for ourselves and for other people. I'm a huge advocate for our Indigenous community. For my son is his dad is from Nigeria, and watching the microaggressions just from being part of that, and seeing how other people treat my son differently when he's with me or with his father, or it's really eye-opening when it doesn't. I don't see it physically. It doesn't happen for me, but when I see other people and it's going through that, I have to be a voice. There's no option for me. It's like you either are an advocate and you're helping, or you're not. And when I found out what I found out, going through the Native Counseling Service of the residential schools, and I had no idea they don't tell you that in school. And when I found out, all I can think of is, how can I help? And I really, that's my message. It's like, all us colonizers, how can you help make a difference? If it's a t-shirt, if it's whatever it is, you do something, say something, speak up whenever you see it. So thank you for giving me a bit of a platform to explain who I am and what I do. And it happened for me because it really gave me my voice to speak up and say, hey, this is wrong. And now here I am.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Definitely. You brought up a couple of terms that I was thinking about as you were talking. And one of them is, I'm one of those people that actually thinks that there are terms that are sometimes misused and not used in the correct way. Because as you kind of alluded to, I think that we all have a little bit of crazy in us and everything in that space and everything. Because I used to say that I don't know what I would do if I ran into a totally sane person, because they were probably the ones that are actually crazy. Because we also have to have a little bit of a crazy attitude just to put up with day-to-day life and all of that. So I sometimes wonder about folks who are even in that therapy space, not saying that folks don't need therapy or need mental wellness and that spiritual and emotional and the other journeys that we go on. But I do know that sometimes it's all right to have a little bit of crazy in your life. I think that if you don't have that, you've lost a little sense of humanity. But that's just my thoughts. I don't know if Pamela agrees with me. And I'm also going to bring in one of the other guests and see what Jazzy T has got to say about that as well. But you also brought up microaggression, and I know that even on the network, sometimes folks talk about that and they feel that it is overused, and I don't think that it's overused, but I know that one of my co-hosts says that it's overused and that they are feeling like they are walking on hands and needles because they don't know how to handle dealing with whether they are doing microaggressions or not. And I know that one of my co-hosts on one of the news shows has brought that up, how he feels that he sometimes is walking on eggshells, for lack of a better term, because he doesn't know when he is quote unquote stepping over the line and all in that space. But I'd love to hear you three ladies' thoughts when you hear people that have those kind of conversations.
Well, I think that Deborah was quite clear. Either you're an ally or you're not. Either it's black or it's black and white. It's quite clear. There are no grey areas. And as someone who has been on the receiving end, microaggressions are, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. The first cut, you get over it. But when it continually happens year in, year out, when you're treated differently, it can be difficult to cope with and to remain sane, I suppose. And for me, what has really helped is making sure that I am with people who completely understand what it is that I'm talking about. So if I feel as though I'm being oversensitive, I know that I can run it by one of my sisters, for example, and say, this X happened today. Y happened today. What do you think? And they will help me with my thinking around that particular issue so that I'm very clear about whether I overreacted or not, because not all microaggressions you feel able to respond to. Because it's exhausting. It's really tiring to always feel as though you're on guard around particular issues. So that's my experience, really. It can be death by 1,000 cuts. And, one story I do remember was not being spoken to very nicely by one of my colleagues at work. And I went to bring that to the attention of my line manager, who didn't know how to react. He didn't know what to say. So I said, well, I want to let you know that this is what I'm experiencing. I don't expect you to do anything about it. But when I blow up, I want you to know that this has been a journey that I've been on. I just haven't suddenly exploded and been unreasonable. I want you to let you know that when I do address it, it's not going to come out nice. It's not going to be pretty. I'm not going to be articulate about it. I'm going to say it how it is. And then I know that he's going to come to you to expect you to do something about it. But I'm giving him his warning from now. So whatever discussion you have with him, you have to tell him to back down. And, you're doing that at 21 years old, at 22 years old. You're a young person. There was no such thing as microaggressions back then. You felt slighted. You knew that deep down in your core that it wasn't right, but there was no name to go with it. It's only now that I'm going back and reflecting, I'm able to say that was a microaggression, that was a microaggression, and that was a microaggression. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Jazzy, and if you can share a little bit about your own journey and your own story. I'm sure folks would be interested in knowing that as well. But one of the things I was curious to hear from all of y'all about is how important is it to have strong role models, and role models that are in, like this particular case, I think of all three of you as strong women and all in that space. And I do know that sometimes folks will think that we don't need strong women. And I've actually also had some folks that say that they just want to be recognized for whatever their skill sets are, and they don't want to be given an advantage. And they sometimes feel that that's what affirmative action does, and some of the other programs that are out there. But Jazzy, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and to some of what's going on in your life, and you just share with Deborah, Pamela, and our audience a little bit about your own personal journey.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Mark. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay,
Totally.
perfect. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Pamela and Deborah. And so first thing that comes to mind is I grew up the only brown person in my family for at least the first 15 years. I didn't know my dad's side of the family. My dad is Native American, but I came out looking like this, so I grew up with white people, and I didn't understand what was happening to me a lot of the times. So like, as I grew older, I would start to realize like, wow, that was racist, or that was prejudice, or, you know what I mean? Different things like that. But I didn't know it wasn't being talked about. So when you talk about, like role models and stuff, it wasn't until I got into the 8th grade, had my first Black friend, first box braids, and, seen the Wiz for the first time. This is a whole new world out here. And so I'm starting to learn, about the culture that I'm being perceived as. And so this might be a little bit off topic, but as a mixed person, and I consider myself a mixed person, I don't think there's anything wrong with calling yourself that. You have to realize that, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, right? And our experiences shape our culture. That's my personal opinion. But you go out to the world representing a race of people, and people have their preconceived notions, they have their stereotypes and all that stuff. And so as a person who didn't grow up the same way other Black Americans may have grown up, it was very eye-opening for me, and I had to learn a lot, and even when I first got on the news here, I'm in Rochester, New York, and I got on the morning news at Channel 10 on the NBC station reporting traffic. And I would hear from so many, younger Black women, oh, I see you out there, you representing sis and all this other type of stuff. So then I became the role model for a group of people, that I inspire to be the role model for people, because I didn't have that role model, so when people come from mixed race cultures or biracial cultures, like I intend to be like that. But growing up without it, it's still difficult. It's something that, you have to just, I am a very strong person. I'm a very strong minded person. And I believe that, God puts you in a position. In my case, I was being put in a position of being raised in a white culture, but looking like a Black American, so that I can go through those trials, tribulations, and have those lessons to be able to pass on to other people. So I know it's a little bit different answer than probably you were expecting, but that's my perspective.
No, I appreciate it. And that's one of the things I love about this show, is giving people having different perspectives and all in that line. You mentioned your own media background, and we actually have a media show that we were doing earlier and everything. But I was just wondering, do you feel that there is enough representation in the media landscape, particularly the television media landscape, of both minorities and women in general, because I do know that there has been some ageism things and conversations around our media, even though we just recently lost a legend in media, that being Barbara Walters, who lived and did a lot of great work in that space and was definitely a journalist pretty much all the way up to her death, as far as I'm concerned, and everything in that space. But I just wondered, do you feel that we have made enough grounds in diversity in the media?
So again, I'm going to kind of come at this a little bit sideways. I definitely, number one, I'm going to say I love the movement as far as Black women being able to wear their hair how they want. Hallelujah. I would wear my hair curly. I never did the braids, but I will say that for the first year, I was straightening it every single day because that's what you're supposed to do, right? But in the last couple of years, I've definitely been seeing more braids. I've been seeing locks. I've been seeing afros. Even Joy Reid for a while when she first came out, but then she reverted kind of back and went blonde and straight, but whatever. Just kind of put that to the side. What I'm not seeing, though, is straight Black men on the TV and in the newsroom. And I'm saying this not against LGBTQ at all, but they are represented in the newsroom way more, disproportionately more than straight Black men. It's crazy. So when we did finally get a photographer, he only lasted a couple years because he was treated poorly, right? We got an audio guy. He was there unhappily, but did it for the paycheck, also treated poorly. So I would love to see that. And my husband talks about that a lot. Like, that's why they need somebody like me up in there, because I wouldn't let this happen. I want to let that happen, especially the criticism and just the flat out anguish that I experienced and other Black women in the newsroom experienced from the other employees and also from the viewers. So, I mean, I got a story for you.
Yes.
I got a story for you. So a couple years ago, we had a meteorologist doing his evening report from, and he was showing a camera of our local MLK park. And it was really supposed to be a very, very simple shot, simple broadcast. And he said, as we take a look at Martin Luther Coon Park, right? He said Martin Luther Coon Park, right? And it's snowing, blah, blah, blah. Continued on with his forecast. Somebody happened to be recording it and shared it on Facebook. It started to get a lot of attention. It got back to me. And I was like, oh my God, like this is our station. I have to at least, figure out, did he realize he said that? Are we doing anything about that? Because that's just the type of person that I am. So I reached out to the meteorologist. He claimed to be, oh my God, I would never say something like that, right? Fast forward, once he got called into the office, he had no remorse, and he was just like, I can't believe you're even calling me in for this. He ends up getting fired. We as a TV station ended up having multiple advertisers pull their money from the network because he got fired. He goes on, his name is Jeremy Capel. He goes on to be a very strong voice and presence for the Trump movement, and even went to January 6th riot at the Capitals and everything like that. So he went from like, oh my gosh, I would never, to actually, that is who I am. This is a blessing. Now I have a career on YouTube and Facebook because of, now I get to be my real self. And so in that, we not only did the advertisers pull out, but we had a lot of viewers call in, say, I can't believe that you're bowing to the Blacks now. And because like when you send an email into any newsroom, everyone who works there gets that email. So I'm seeing all of this. So that's one example. We have an evening Black reporter, female, who is experiencing, she's going through breast cancer, and she often talks about that. And every October she does segments and specials. We had somebody write in saying, oh my God, lady, just die already. We're so sick and tired of hearing about you and your cancer. Like, this is the stuff that we go through, and there is absolutely no support emotionally for us in that newsroom. It's just like, whatever, deal with it.
Well, that's amazing and everything. And you have people that do that regularly. One of the things I've heard about people complaining is when, and I don't know y'all thoughts about this, but I've heard even friendly conversations when people feel that maybe one movement is being hijacked by another. And you just talked about the LGBTQI community, and I know that I've heard that even with Black Lives Matter and other things and all in that space. But I just wanted you three ladies, y'all's thoughts on that as to whether there is enough, one, diversity in viewpoints in the different movements, and if there are sometimes cases where an issue is maybe taken and then taken out of context or taken in another direction than maybe it was intended to go in, and all in that space. Pamela, any thoughts? Because maybe that's been some of the things that have been going on even over there in London and some of the other parts of the world.
Oh dear. Sometimes I feel that the burden of having so many issues can be so overwhelming, because I'm obviously a Black woman. I have a disability on top of that. And if I was homosexual as well, I think I would tick all the boxes. So it just feels to me as though I have to pick a struggle. And if I have to pick a struggle, then by far challenging the racist attitudes of people that I work with, work alongside in the criminal justice system, that impacts on me the most. People don't see me as a woman first, they see me as a Black woman first. So therefore, that's the struggle, whether I like it or not, that's the struggle that I have to be in and I have to be fighting. People can hide their sexuality, and many do for many different reasons. But for me, by far the one that I have to be dealing with is racism and discrimination, because it just doesn't impact on me. It impacts on my family. It impacts on my young Black sons that I have who are growing up here as well, where people predominantly see their skin color before they see anything else. They are watched and policed more severely. We for my son to go out, he's going to be 16 next month. He practically has to give me a risk assessment before he can go anywhere. I need to know who he's with, where they're going. If they change their mind about where they're going, he needs to let me know. He's got a list of things that he needs to check first, because I need to know at all times that he is going to be safe. So for me, by far, my experiences of being a Black woman living in London trumps everything, because that's the first thing that people see and the first thing that I'm judged on.
And Deborah, just the flip side of that, you probably get some teasing remarks and everything, because you did mention that your husband was Nigerian, you have a mixed child and all in that space. So I'm assuming that some people, when they, and I'm going to use the term that's used in social media, when they see you, they probably assume that you fall into the quote unquote Karen category and all in that space. And then they find out that you might be more of an ally than they are expecting. So I just wanted your take on that, because I'm thinking that people may already have a certain stereotype when they see you, and then they learn more things as they get to know you.
Yeah. And it's challenging, because I know who I am, and I know what I stand for and who I stand for, and I stand for equal rights for everybody. And just because somebody can be an asshole in any, if I can swear, in any color, religion, anything, but it depends on who your heart is and what's your heart saying. So yes, I feel that I do get that. That's why I make sure I loud and proudly wear something that says, hey, I'm an ally, I'm out there, I am a target, not just because I can't ever say I know what it feels like. I don't, but I definitely know what it feels like when you don't have support, when you don't have somebody to say, hey, that's wrong, make it awkward. It is difficult to watch my son, and I grew up in, we call it Sure White Park. I grew up there, and it was farmers, but it was predominantly white, and my son went to school there, and I didn't even realize that the teachers were treating him differently. I just thought that, okay, but now that I know what I know, and it's like, wow, this teacher was racist towards my son. And my son, even, he comes up to me, he's like, wow, I can't believe this happened, and trying to walk through it with him, and him being mixed as well. It's difficult because he sees both sides. With his dad, he gets treated way differently. And then when he's with me, it's completely different. And, and he doesn't really feel like he fits in. And I really resonated with what you were saying about being mixed. I really, truly feel that if I don't want to be represented as a Karen, then I must make myself different. On the back of my jacket, I have every child matters. I'm inclusive. I have rainbows. I make sure that I'm loud and proud that I'm an ally, and I really feel that that's important. And also, if you see something, to speak up. It's not your responsibility for you guys and for people who are being discriminated against to stand up to microaggression. It is up for people around them, the allies that see that and say, hey, that's not okay. Make it awkward. I don't know. It would be really good to get Jesse Limscone on here. He hosted a digital rally a week after George Floyd was murdered. And I volunteered to be a photographer because I wanted to show my support. And he has a movement called Make It Awkward. He was in Edmonton doing a photo shoot or video, and somebody loudly yelled out the N-word. And this guy, he's a big football player, and he comes up and he just opens their door as it's being taped. He says, "Who's the, what do you want to say?" And then so that got a lot of traction. And then he started something called Make It Awkward, and call people out on it. Call people out. And it isn't up. You're the people who are being discriminated against aren't the people that need the help. It's the people like the Karens and the all those people that went to the rally that need to be called out, and they need to be made it awkward, and they need to be held accountable by people that can actually make a difference instead of them saying, oh, well, you're just oversensitive. I notice those microaggressions. He's my ex-husband, but we're incredible friends. We work together to raise our son with love. It is difficult. It's not as in Canada. It's not quite as out there as in the States as what you guys go through, because here it's all micro. It's all against the Indigenous communities, and it's quiet, which is really gross. Like, people just say it, they think it, and then you feel that discrimination. So I really feel it's up to allies to let you know that they're allies, not just, sit in the back corner. You got to say something, make it awkward, use your voice, be a true ally. That's what I feel.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Deborah, along those same lines, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, but I do know that there is a very active and sometimes even not recognized Indigenous community there in Canada. I've actually got, because me and my younger brother primarily identify on the African-American side of our heritage. We acknowledge other parts of the heritage as well, but I have other cousins that are very much into the Native American side and are very active in the powwow culture and all of that. And one of them actually lives there in Canada, and actually he's divorced as well now himself, or at least heading that direction and all in that space. But definitely it does seem like there is not a lot of great recognition of the Native population there, the Indigenous population there in Canada. But I'd love to hear your take on that as one that lives in that area of the world.
Ever since COVID, and there was unfortunately burial sites of children that were taken from their houses and stolen, and they found the grave sites. And ever since that started, it started a momentum, a beautiful momentum of people standing up and recognizing, because it was so silently snuffed out, right? It was genocide that was quiet. Nobody talked about it. It was just, okay, push them aside, take their baby, So right now, it is starting to grow, and the momentum of learning about other people's culture and not feeling awkward to fit in and ask questions and make friends with people. Don't be afraid. Like people aren't going to be offended when you step out and say, hey, what's the protocol for this? Or what is a ribbon skirt? I'm actually dating an Indigenous man. He's Métis, so he's Métis is French and Indigenous, and he's Métis, and his sister made me a ribbon skirt, and I took this initiative to look it up, and I truly feel it's our responsibility, not to oh, you teach me. Oh, what's it? No, if you want to learn, you take it on yourself. You learn it, and make it uncomfortable. Go to powwows. Go learn the culture. Go ask an elder. If you don't know one, find somebody who does, and ask them, because that is what taking incentive is, and taking responsibility. And I truly, a lot of people don't think like this, but I guess I can be that voice. I am. My heritage, we do have Métis within our bloodstream, but I don't look it. There's a lot of called white identifying Indigenous, so they don't get the racism as nearly as much as somebody who looks Indigenous. It's terrible. My boyfriend, we go to any store or anything, and the security's following him around, or he's actually been asked to like step outside and wait outside while somebody was in the Walmart, and I'm just like, whoa, like not on my watch, but it's about taking incentive, learning for yourself, and it is being represented a lot more, and being curious and just being a human. It doesn't seem that hard, but I think people really need to be retrained, and I think COVID did that. I think COVID really put people in their rooms and gave a chance for movements like the Black Lives Matter movement, like Every Child Matters movement, like what's happening. And while we were at I was at the digital rally for Black Lives Matter. Sterling Scott, he's an incredible comedian, and he is passionate. I do recommend go and check out the digital rally for Black Lives Matter when it happened, because it's all videotaped. But one of the best pieces of advice that I got from that was to clean up a room, you clean in the room that you're in. You start there. So that's my prerogative. I'm starting right here where I am and being a voice for what's happening, what I see, what I experience. And I think that was the best piece of advice I could ever get and then give, is just start where you're at and clean up the room that you're in. So I hope that helped a bit.
No, that definitely helped a bit. I was just actually, you were saying that, I was thinking about a very interesting fact. I know that for a minute, when folks started to get a lot of money from the reservations, and particularly those that got casinos and even some other kinds of government aid, whether it was in the United States or whether it was in Canada or in other places, then a lot of people started identifying more with their Native American ancestry. And not saying that they did not have legitimate Native American ancestry, but you do sometimes wonder how many people were using the ancestry as a way to get what a friend of mine calls the bag, and all of that, meaning to get to the money and all in that space. And I'm wondering if we are fortunate enough to, and I know some arguments have been made as to whether we need or don't need reparations, how many people will be then claiming more of their African American ancestry and all in that space. So Jazz, I'd love to hear from your thoughts, and maybe you and Pamela, about that, and all in that line. And we're going to see more people that are looking at maybe their Thomas Jefferson side of their ancestry and everything, because we do know that Thomas Jefferson definitely had some relationships with his slave and all in that space. So they might be in there in that lower percentage, but then all of a sudden, because there's money involved, want to get some of those dimes and everything, and how would we even administer that? But I'd love to hear maybe some of your thoughts as a news person.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot been going through my mind as Deborah was talking, and I don't want to forget all of the points. Well, I'll say this: when I was applying for college and I was I kept hearing, oh, natives go to college for free. It's just something you kind of just hear about. So I'm like, oh, how do I go about doing this? And then the first thing that I found out is you have to not only have it in your blood, but you have to be federally registered with a tribe, and more so than a tribe, then your band. So you have to figure out what band do you belong to. And so I was finally able to, trace my father's last name over to the Rocky Boy, something or another. And I'll tell you, I don't remember because it was so difficult to prove, to them that my father was, actually a part of this. He's Cree. And so I was trying to get that documentation and I was never able to get it. Luckily, my academics helped me, just get the scholarships and stuff that I needed. But it was very, very difficult, even though, on my birth certificate, the name there says, a person who's 100% indigenous. And on there, it does say Native American. And even with that, I was not able to get anything. Now I'll talk on the flip side. So I run a podcast network called Jazzcast Pros, and one of the shows is called Igniting Hope for Health Equity. And we sat down with somebody from the Seneca Nation here in Western New York. And there's a big thing going on right now where it's New York State versus Seneca Nation. So even if you're like driving through New York and there's a portion of the throughway where it says you are now leaving New York and entering Seneca Nation. So I love to see that, because as a person growing up in Michigan, we didn't really have like big populations of Native people. And the Senecas own two very large casinos, very, very profitable casinos. And so now the state of New York is, fighting Seneca because New York State feels like they're not getting their share, right? Oh, you should just give us, even though it's your land, it's your casino, it's your employees, you're putting in all the work, you have all the risk, but just give us 30% of this money, right? And so like there's this whole thing about that. And so Pastor George, the host of Igniting Hope for Health Equity, he sat down with somebody from the Deer Clan, and she is a very big advocate, going back to advocacy. So I would definitely encourage, if you look up Seneca Nation of Indians versus New York State, that's one of the podcasts that we did, one of the most popular episodes actually. And it goes back to, like Deborah was saying, when people started to find out about, the so-called Indian schools, right? Kill the Indian, save the man. Like, wow, and then so also going back to another thing Deborah said is like there's a lot of white passing indigenous people that just find it much easier to live life as a white person. There's a person here that I had on another podcast, and I didn't know until meeting her in person that she actually had any Native in her at all. She married a white person, they lived their life and very much engulfed in the white culture, but it took a lot of digging for me to kind of get that out of her, so I just feel like it would be very strange, and I don't think it would ever actually happen for a person who is looking like a minority but has ties to, as you said, Thomas Jefferson, and if they all of a sudden said, oh, white people get this, we're not going to get that money. I'm just telling you right now, it's not going to happen. There are plenty of white looking people that are going to be first in line. And then once you get up there, then they're going to be like, oh, sorry, that money is ran out. That's never going to happen, Mark. It's never going to happen.
Definitely, Jazzy. If you would tell people a little bit about the network, because that's one of the things that I was also curious about even when we met on Clubhouse and all in that line. And definitely, I've seen more and more folks that have been creating networks. I mentioned to you that that's kind of what Pod TV is, and Nick and Kim founded this along with a lot of their other folks that were involved. And then I got involved maybe about me and Shaquille were talking about this earlier because he was one of the early people, along with one other person that's on the network still. But then I joined maybe about 6 months or a year in, and have been with them pretty much since, and have definitely been involved in a lot of their programming. But I do know that there have been a lot of efforts to diversify the playing field and to definitely give more voices. And it sounds like that's what y'all are doing. It's definitely what Pod TV is trying to do, and a number of other ones. The on Network. I think it's one of them that I heard about and all in that space. And definitely I know that David Grasso has one as well that is very much involved in more shorter kind of content. And he comes out of the Latin American community out of, I think he's between Miami and California because he has roots in both of those places. But you just share a little bit about your own network and its journey.
Yeah, sure. So Jazzcast Pros Network, we're really on a mission to empower, educate, and inspire women and people of color. So we want to attain the social equity, become financially independent, and maintain healthy relationships with ourselves and with others. And so when I started producing my first podcast, Beauty Boss Millionaire, it's about a self-made millionaire who gives daily tips on how to start and grow your business. And so she has a brick and mortar beauty business, started in her garage here in Rochester, New York, expanded to Buffalo, New York City, and now she enjoys her mansion down in Sarasota, Florida, but continues to run and oversee, her businesses. So we started day by day because of the idea that people would always ask her for entrepreneurial advice. And she's like, look, I can't talk to all these people one-on-one. I want to, create a podcast on demand that they can go and listen to. That grew into our second podcast, Healthy Illness, which is a mental health podcast, helping you to build healthy relationships while living with mental health conditions. And so it just kind of, destigmatizes mental illness. Yeah, you have this diagnosis, but that's not all you are. You can still have a great career and build healthy relationships, but it also helps people, who don't have mental health conditions, but want to be in a relationship, friendship, business or romantic with somebody who has bipolar or depression or anxiety, to kind of understand the episodes that a person might be going through. I'll just give one more example. We have one called Father Torch, Be the Dad That You Wish You Had. So the host of that has 9 kids, a couple different mothers, has been through the child support system, is a larger Black man with dreadlocks, so he has a bunch of different experiences just from his own stature. But he's an advocate in the community for young fathers. So the idea here is that I'll find people who have great messages, and I help to develop them, and I edit the shows for them. But just in the last really 2 weeks since this year started, I've opened it up where if you already have a podcast, you can join my network just by simply sharing your RSS feed. And it's not exclusive. So if you're already on a network, you just want a little bit more exposure, I'm okay with that. But if you really want to get down with us as far as like sharing in the network advertising and monetizing and doing promo swaps, because we do that a lot. We guest swap on each other's shows a lot as well. Everybody's identified with a jingle in the beginning. And that's something that, I just took that from, real networks, right? So like whether it's ABC, NBC, 20th Century Fox, New Line Cinema, as soon as a Friday movie would come on, you see that New Line Cinema thing come on, right? And that's one thing, how we identify ourselves as a network, like we're in this together. And just like if you turn on History Channel, you already kind of know what to expect, right? You're going to see ancient aliens, you're going to see pawn shops, you're going to see something that teaches you something about history, right? So that's my goal as a network, is not to just accept any and everybody, but when people come to Jazzcast Pros, they want to be inspired, educated, and feel like they can really create the life that they deserve when they listen to our podcast.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got 2 podcasters that are interested in joining, because I saw both Deborah and Pamela raise their hands and everything. And as the de facto program director at Pod TV, I can say that allegiances and alliances, they've pretty much given me abilities to do that across the board. So we can definitely have that conversation as well. So definitely can get the things that are done more in the live stream space versus the podcast space, and all in that kind of way.
Okay, I'm definitely interested in that, because I am an audio person, even though I did 3 years on TV. I say that like I did a bid because it was like jail. But I did my 3 years, I did my time. But yeah, video streaming and all that is something that I am not focused on for me to do, but I would love to have that capability for the people on my network. I want to make sure that these sound great, you know what I mean? And they're distributed to, right now we have 25 different podcast platforms. And that's another thing I just help to educate people on. I'll do a 30-minute consultation with anybody. Like I just had one this morning who wants to start a podcast, never listened to a podcast, didn't even understand that she has an app on her phone called Apple Podcasts that she can click on. And she's like, how do I even like listen to your show? So I just say that to say, like, I'll talk to anybody for 30 minutes if I can help them. If she ever becomes a client, great. If she doesn't, great too. Maybe at least she become a podcast listener at the very, very minimum, you know? But yeah, that's my mission, is to just stay in podcasting. I do believe that there's a difference between being a YouTuber and a podcaster. I do not believe if you're just on YouTube and you don't have RSS feed that you're a podcaster. And one of my reels went viral on Instagram because I'm very strong about that. And I believe that everybody has their place, but I know that a YouTube audience acts different than a podcast listener. We got different audiences. We need to serve them correctly. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with filming the making of your podcast and putting that behind the scenes on YouTube, but that's what it is. If you're just on YouTube, I don't believe that you're a podcaster, because a podcaster needs to serve their audience differently because it's a completely audio experience.
Right. And like I said, Pod TV is on Roku and on Amazon Fire, and looking at some other outlets as well. So there are different ways to get out there, not just the ways like Anchor and Spreaker and some of the other ways. So there are, like you said, Jazzy, different methods that people can use and all of that. And we have a variety of shows, everything from a couple of finance shows to some shows around wellness and all in that space. So definitely there are different types of programs. I think there's even one that's coming from, I want to say it's in the Northeast. It's not New York, but it might be Maine. And it's the Angry Geeks that do a show around comic books and all in that space. But out of that, they have also recently sent us a wrestling show. So we now have Faces and Heels, which is all about that kind of Northeastern wrestling that goes on in that space and all in that kind of way. So there's different kinds of programming and all for everybody here, because all of y'all are in that media landscape and everything. What are some of the biggest myths that y'all have had to conquer in going into media and all in that space? So I'll start with you, Pamela, because I'm sure it might even be different there in Britain than it is in other parts. But what are some of those myths that surprised you or that you've had to conquer to some degree?
Well, I do have problems with my eyesight. I've had several surgeries over the last few years, the last 4 years. So the technical side of it all, I thought that I would never grasp how to upload audio onto, I'm on Anchor. Was difficult. I really remember one particular Saturday morning, I was determined to get this podcast onto Amazon Music, for example. And it literally took me the whole morning to know how to do that. And in the end, it was just so simple. But at the time, it just felt as though there was a mountain to climb, and I just wasn't, so I'm not technically minded. But one thing about having a sponsor is that you can meet with them and discuss these kind of things. It was going to take me the whole day just to edit one of my audios. And they said, we'll do some research, come back to us with some names, and we'll take it from there. And that's been really good to work with a company like Dolgetty, who will say, okay, well, what will take me the whole day to do will take a producer, half an hour. So it's a much better use of my time. So for me, it's been learning, what is it that I can do? And what is it that maybe somebody else is best qualified to do? And I think that for me, also having a mentor, someone who is already in that space and doing their podcast and don't see me as competition, to talk me through some of the elements of it as well. So, for example, I have an outro and I have an intro bit that I do. About that, I always script it now. I just write a few notes about exactly what it is that I want to say and what themes I want to pull in, but all that has been learning as I've been going on as well. So having a mentor, I think, has been crucial in terms of developing my podcast as well. So for me, it's definitely the technical challenges. I'm not down for that. But the interviewing bit is down pat. I love the idea. I just give it to my producer, and he turns my babble into something worth listening to.
Yes, yes. That's awesome.
Deborah?
Well, I've done quite a lot of work. It wasn't podcast, it was interviews. It was on Facebook, Real People, Real Stories, Raw. And we would interview people who've gone through challenging times and now what they're doing to make a difference. So I had a lot, that was about a year and a half. I worked with Jay Rothman as a co-host. And then I realized you don't always need somebody else to be able to do your own thing. And then that's when I created my own podcast. I realized, you know what, I can just go on Anchor. Like, that's probably the quickest thing for me, and just start talking. And you can always delete it. You can edit it. You can figure out as you go. You can remove things if you want. It's not live. One of the challenges for me was just doing it. Having a disability, I was diagnosed with bipolar and ADHD, and now I realize it's autism as well. So all those little micro things that are mountains, that like one step, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know. So it just stopped me in my tracks. I just say, like, now just be afraid and do it. And what's the worst that can happen? If that can happen, then you're prepared for it. And if you fail to prepare, you're prepared to fail. So I've learned to really look at somebody who I really enjoy, what they're doing successfully, and maybe some things that I don't agree with certain things, and do more of what I like, and continue to interview the guests that will be part of my show, instead of me trying to make them trying to get them in to be part of them, to showcase them. So, really getting the right guests on is important, and just having fun with it. I think that's one thing. It's not so serious. I think having fun with it, and realizing that there's an edit button. But the hardest part for me was just getting started, because it's an imposter syndrome. But once you get over that little hump and just do it and get used to it and just be consistent.
I'm glad you brought up the imposter syndrome, because that's actually, and I hope that the other guests will come back in, but I know she was having signals over there in London, and that can be an issue sometimes with podcasts, but that imposter syndrome can be very real. So Jazzy and Deborah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because I do know that sometimes we can listen to those inner critics, and I know that I've been guilty of it. I know others that have been guilty of it as well. And of course, we know that the outer critics can be just as bad. So whether it's us listening to our inner voices or those outer voices. So I was just wondering, how do the two of you deal with that imposter syndrome and those critics that are always there, whether that's our internal voice or that voice from outside that sometimes doesn't want to encourage us, and all in that space? Because sometimes it can even be significant others and family members that will tell you that, you'll never make anything with this whole media thing, or you'll never make anything as an author, or a number of the other things that we've talked about, and all in that space. So just wondering, how do y'all deal with it? So I'll start with you, Jazzy, and then go to Deborah. But how do you deal with that imposter syndrome?
Well, I guess I'll start by sharing that, I've been a radio host for over 20 years. I've always, been the person in front of the microphone. And, and after 20 years, you would assume that I would be promoted, be some sort of manager or something like that. And it just never happened for me. So when my friend, the host of Beauty Boss Millionaire, she came to me with a vote of confidence, because she knows that in my heart, I'm a producer. Like, that's what I really love to do in editing as well. And she was like, no, God, came to me in a dream, and he said that Jazzy is a producer. And so you're going to be my producer, and we're going to make this podcast. So, I was like, I've never even listened to a podcast. This was, 2021. I was like, I never even listened to a podcast before. How the heck am I going to do this? So first of all, I'll say it takes somebody, for me, that believed in me, right? But as I was growing the network, and I'm still, doing a majority of the busy work by myself. I'm in 2023, I'm attracting the right editors, the right salespeople to further my dream and my vision for the network. But as I would start to get back into Clubhouse rooms, because I had been off Clubhouse for a long time, and I would listen to, so-called gurus and experts and all of this stuff. And I'm like, I would say something. I think this happened in a room that you were in, Mark. I'm pretty sure it did. To somebody who has a network and has all these people around and all these shows connected to her. And then I thought I brought up something. She was like, wow, I never even thought about doing that. And it took that moment for me to be like, okay, so here I am thinking, putting them on this pedestal, and I'm coming up with ideas that they didn't even think of. And to me, it's like, of course we're going to do this, So I think that helps to get into the room, whether it's a Clubhouse room or a physical room, for the people that you put on the pedestal, really get a conversation going with them. And then you're going to realize they're not all that. and you have a lot to offer, and you have ways of doing things and ways of thinking about things that can really take the industry up a notch once given an opportunity. And what I love about the pandemic is it leveled everybody. Nobody was allowed to, go into their workplace or go into the big, events. Everybody was locked in their home with their phone and their computer. So a lot of people were able to take that opportunity, whether they started a podcast, started an IG Live, Facebook Live, YouTube channel, and say, look, this is what it is. And you have people like Kevin Samuels, who charted his own path, and God rest his soul. But you had just a lot of people who were able to say, you know what? I don't need that. I don't need that validation from this corporation or whatever the case. I can and I will because I must. Right now. And so a lot of great things come out of desperation and opportunity.
No doubt that you said that, because you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, I used to go regularly, and it moved last year to an even year. So it'll be back next year as opposed to this coming year that we're in, and all in that space. But I used to go regularly to the National Black Theater Festival, where a lot of African-American actors and famous folks would be there. Angela Bassett, Ruby Dee, and Ossie Davis, when they were living. Some of the other great names, including Petrie Bird, that was the bailiff on Judge Judy, and a number of other folks that would be on there on a regular basis. And I would oftentimes get involved in conversations, sometimes about business, sometimes just about life in those different rooms. And folks would sometimes ask me, well, how do you talk to those folks? I'm like, you talk to them just like you talk to anybody else. They are just as common. And you have some that are more aloof or have a little bit of a sedity attitude, but I find that most of them are willing and wanting to be engaged with conversations with, quote unquote, the regular folks, and all of that. Yes. That actually gives them a sense of normality, and that they actually enjoy some of those conversations that they don't get enough of when they've got their handlers all the time around them and all of that. So sometimes you just got to be willing to approach them, and if you've got something that you're approaching them about, and that's business oriented, make it a business conversation. Don't get caught up in the whole stargazing part of it as well, because sometimes folks can get caught up in the stargazing part. And I'm not saying that you can't stargaze, because sometimes that's why you want to meet them. But if that's what you're going for that meeting for, let that be the intention. But if you're going for a business, let it be a business intention. And I think that sometimes we don't do enough of that. We try to mix those kind of relationships together and everything. So one of the things I was curious, I definitely want to hear from you, Deborah, about the imposter syndrome, but then I've got another one that I was curious about, that I was going to ask about the business side of stuff. But how do you deal with that imposter syndrome?
Well, I just realized that we are all human, and if I make a podcast about how uncomfortable I am, or how nervous I get, or just be real. And even if I don't post it, and sometimes I won't, but I got it out there, and I expressed it, I felt it, I feel, healed, reveal. And that's how I live my life. I feel it, I heal from it, and then I reveal it. And a lot of times, more often than not, somebody else has felt that, and they'll be like, wow, I'm just so grateful you talked about this, or I'm so grateful you're vulnerable and you're able to discuss this without shame, blame, or guilt, because it's something that really does come up for me. But it's also something that helps me to grow, because it allows me to really go inside and be like, okay, what is like, how come I'm feeling this way? What's going on? Why do I feel less? And then if it's because, oh, I don't know this, I don't know that, then I go and research it, and I become an expert in that field, if that's so what I'm called to do. I think it's about trusting yourself and realizing that maybe we're not supposed to talk about that thing, and just following the guidance that God gives us to. So we're going to be, when we pray about it, and when we really trust our message that we have, and it's not me that's speaking, it's coming through me, and just really trusting in the process of sharing my message, and sharing what it's like to live with a disability, sharing what it's like to live with imposter syndrome, or whatever it is that's difficult. I write poetry about it. I let it out. So yeah, it is difficult. But it also helps me speak with more confidence, because I speak about it more, and I never own it. I never say my anxiety or my depression. I say the depression. Coming from somebody, I used to weigh 385 pounds, so I know what it's like to be the biggest person in the room and be ignored. And so my voice was so quiet. The only thing I would speak up with was like trying to be funny, trying to serve somebody else, and all that imposter syndrome, not enough, just exuded through me. So after I've lost the weight, I really gained so much more confidence in who I am, and just honoring my truth. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. If Miss Haynes is still there, I'm sure that she might have some thoughts around the imposter syndrome as well, because that's part of what we were talking about, is how we cope with that imposter syndrome, and also that inner voice, and sometimes those outer critics. So I was just wondering how you dealt with that over there in London, dealing with the imposter syndrome, or the belief that you're not as good as you should be, and sometimes letting those outside voices nag you in a certain kind of way.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry for disappearing like that. I think I'm my biggest critic. I'm very, very hard on myself. And I think I have learned how to get out of my own way. So I had 2018 was my year that I published my book, but I also decided that was the year I was going to say yes to everything that came my way. Every opportunity that came as a result of writing my books. So that meant whenever somebody asked me if I could go on their platform and do something, I did it. When they asked me to appear on TV and radio, I did it. I cut my teeth on the radio with a particular station that has a reputation of basically going for the host. They're gunning for them. And I must have said a few things about domestic abuse that the majority of male listeners didn't agree with, and they went for me, and I stood my grounds. Because I'd said yes to the opportunity, knowing their reputation, but also knowing that there was at least one woman out there that needed to hear what I had to say, that the whole domestic abuse thing is not her fault. And I've been back there 3 times now. I've know that I have I've blocked the network, so people can't ring in because of the amount of people who are ringing in to challenge me. But I've learned to say yes to everything. I've even been a judge on a beauty pageant as a result of saying yes. But I did have an incident that occurred. I was asked to do some guest lecturing at my local university. And in the beginning, I was fine. I've done lecturing in my job before. But when I heard who the other panelist was, they're quite high profile women, been in the media, got letters behind their names and so on. On the day of the lecture, I almost rang to cancel because I was intimidated by the other women on the panel. And I was in my dressing gown thinking, what excuse can I give to the university that they will just accept? And I'm ashamed to say, I was going to ring and say to them that I had COVID. So if I had COVID, no one's really going to argue with you if you're that sick. But, there's this whole conversation, internal dialogue with myself that I need to say yes to myself. Not only would I be letting the students down and the other lecturers down, especially the person who invited me to come, but I need to say yes to me. So I went anyway, and I found out that the other panelists were just as nervous as I was about addressing the students, and I've been invited back. So it only goes to show that sometimes our biggest critic, if I listened to every single voice and whisper that was said to me.
Nope. There she goes. She's back.
I would never have been able to travel with my book. So there's something huge about getting out of one's own way and doing it anyway. But do it if you're scared, do it. Do it if you're afraid, do it. Got the more lipstick I've got on, the more intimidated, the more challenging it is. But I did it anyway. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it wearing Fenty makeup and a bit of lippy as well. But I'm going to do it.
And that makes a lot of sense. That's why you got to have that attitude. You actually mentioned something else that I was just thinking about, because a lot of times folks are intimidated by their lack of credentials. I mean, I just have a bachelor's, and I know some people that are amazing speakers that don't have any degrees, or they might have only done high school, or even sometimes even less than that, but they became experts in certain fields and definitely should be able to speak on those fields and everything. But I do sometimes think that folks don't always have the confidence that they need to have, because they don't have the quote unquote letters behind their name, or the quote unquote right credentials and things in that space. I've even seen that, and I'm 60 now, but I've even seen that in some cases in the dating lanes as well. But I just wondered if you ladies could talk about that lack of credentials, and maybe even encourage some people to go, as you were just saying, Miss Pamela, for those visions, whatever those visions are, despite not having a PhD or a master's, or maybe even not having a bachelor's.
I'll guess I'll just throw my 2 cents in there. So luckily for me, I was exposed to my dream career back in high school. I was working at Best Buy, and a person was producing a cable TV show in Detroit, and was just like, hey, here's my card. I think you would be a great host. I'm 16 years old. And so, and before my 17th birthday, I'm sitting down with people like R&B singer Avant and Mystical and the Yin Yang Twins. This is like 90s, early 2000s. And so I'm sitting here doing interviews, never had been taught how to do an interview, but given an opportunity to do that. Then I go to college and I landed an internship. 4 months into my internship, during my freshman year, they gave me the Saturday show. So I had 4 hours. And so I was already doing, what I'm still doing today, before I had graduated high school, before I graduated college. And so I graduated college just because I wanted to be the first person in my family to do it. But ever since that, nobody has ever asked me to see that bachelor's degree. And I want to show them because it says with honors on it. I want them to see it, but nobody has ever asked me. So I've never really been compelled to say I have to, get a master's or a PhD, because I have friends that I went to high school with who went and got, all these letters behind their name, as you say, but they're still not happy. They're still not working in their career. They spend all their life in school. So for me personally, like, that has never been something for me to inspire to. And, that's not to say you can't keep learning. Like, I definitely believe that you should be able to back up what you say, but that comes from experience. How many people have you helped? What have you actually done that somebody can go and look at? I feel like in 2023, I don't know, God told me to say this. In 2023, you have to have a website. And I don't care what you do. You have to have a website, even if your website is a link tree that says, here's my Facebook, here's my Instagram, here's my Telegram channel. You have to have I don't know why God's telling me this, but you have to have a landing spot, period. Because, and if you have that, you have greater exposure, greater opportunity for connection, and greater opportunity to prove yourself than any somebody with a doctorate and a master's degree who's just sitting at home, like Kanye West had on his College Dropout album. He had a couple skits and he was just like, yeah, so what? I'm homeless, but these degrees keep me warm. You know what I mean? Like, I think about that all the time,
Yeah, but not only do you have to have a landing spot, but I don't know how y'all feel about it, but there's also, and we've seen it in Clubhouse, we've seen it in Facebook, we've seen it in a number of other places. There are a lot of folks that are basically, and I hate to put it this way, but there are a whole lot of scam artists that are out there that will promise you the sea and promise you the world and don't have any ability to give you that world and all of that. And sometimes they are revealed, and sometimes you don't find out till 3 or 4 years later because they are good con artists and all in that space. But I just wonder, how do you deal with those folks? Because there are definitely a few of those, and I'm not just calling out Clubhouse. I've also seen them in Discord and other places, but they are definitely out there, and they are definitely will try to take you to the cleaners, for lack of a better term.
And unfortunately, like, I don't want to call this person a con artist. I really don't. But I just went, they have a great career that I have seen from the 90s, and they talk really good on Clubhouse. So I invested in the course, spent more money than I've ever spent on any course, came out of it knowing this much more than I did going in it, and the connection that I thought I was going to have with this particular person, opportunity to connect with her network, didn't happen. And I feel like if there was a landing page where real people gave real reviews and said, this is what I was able to accomplish after taking this course, I probably should have looked for that more, but I was caught up. I was new on Clubhouse. I was like, oh my God, she's offering a course. I can be just like her. And it didn't happen. So I think it just goes back to having that landing place, having your comments open, right? You shouldn't be afraid of real feedback. You should welcome it, actually. Yeah. So, I mean, if we as the consumer don't, do the research, and on their end as the seller, if they don't make it very easy for us to do that research, maybe we should wait till we do have somebody that we can ask that went through it first before we get caught up in that stuff. That's why I put a client, referral page, on my website. So anybody can go and, see the review there. You can go contact. I did a consultation earlier this morning. And so it's like, well, who have you worked with? And I gave her the Facebook name. So all of my clients, I'm like, go DM them, ask them whatever you want. I'm totally open for that.
No, that makes a lot of sense as you say that, because one of the network heads has actually been somewhat frustrated by some of the other established networks like Facebook and some of the other ones. So they are actually looking at the possibility of starting something that would be kind of what you were saying, which is people that are given actual conversations around like-minded conversations or like-minded individuals and referrals and things like that space. So they're actually looking at the possibility, even within Pod TV, of some social media innovations in that space. And like I said, what that will involve, only time will tell, but that is something that is being strongly considered. And I know some other folks that are looking at trying to find some alternatives to the existing ones that exist, and even some of the newer ones, because I know not everybody is pleased with Rumble either. So.
Have you guys ever heard of, used Pod Chaser?
Podchaser. I've used Podchaser on occasion. I actually prefer Podcast Guest, and there's a couple of other ones that I prefer in general, but definitely I have heard of Podchaser.
Just because it's billed as a social network for podcasters and podcast listeners.
Right.
And, a couple shows that I listen to that are about podcasting, they encourage people to go leave them a review on Podchaser. And I feel like it's an excellent idea, but I feel like not a lot of people are engaged in it. So I was just kind of curious. So then you said Podcast Guester. What did you say? Guesting?
Podcast Guest is actually how you can find podcast guests for your shows. So Podcast
okay,
Guest.
So it's more like Podmatch.
Yeah, and RTMP, IR is another one that is like a guest for podcast servers as well. And I forgot what the RTIR stands for, but I can actually find it in one of my emails really quickly. But they have a lot of famous folks. RTIR newsletter response. So that is another one. And it is media response at RTIR.com. But they have all kinds of folks talking about the Ukraine to medical people to a number of other folks that they represent. And some they let you contact them directly, and some you contact them through the service itself, but they are open to even having some of them let you contact them directly. So that's one. Those are two that I use on a regular basis and in a regular lane just to find some amazing guests. And I found some amazing guests through both of those. And I've also used some of those kind of like niche agencies. Like I know that Eris has Yubo Entertainment, which has a lot of hip hop artists in there. Ellis, which I'm not sure if they're still around, but Ellis X had a lot of tech type folks on their PR service. And there were a couple of other ones that I was using on a regular basis to find guests. So there are great ways to find guests. I will say that something that frustrates me, and it comes back to the other thing we were talking about, is I am not big. I'm not saying that you can't, if the folks who want to do it, that's all right. But I am not big on paying for guests. And there are some services and some people that are always trying to get their selves paid as a guest. And I'm like, I'm providing a service and all of that. So I'm not trying to pay $500 to $1,000. And I've heard some other crazy figures in that lane and everything, but I don't know. So I'm not a big fan of that. And I don't know how y'all feel about it, but I'm also not a big fan. I don't mind, because even podcast guests will give you some hints, and I won't say that I don't use those to some degree about subject matters and everything, but I'm not a big fan of some of the guests that want to give you like a whole itinerary of what they want you to ask and all in that line. Because I have seen some folks that want to give you pretty much a open script and all of that. And I'm going like, I don't think that the listeners want that. I think they want to get to know the people like we've been doing today and not trying to have something that is overly scripted. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
What I've done in the past when I was hosting is I love getting reviews as well, like feedback. And we're getting, I'll go back into like the credentials on the wall as well after, because, but what I do is I have a list of questions of like, this is kind of what I'm geared to. So be prepared, listen to some of my shows. This is what we might talk about. Probably not. We'll probably maybe ask 3 questions. And then after they get an email with a survey, what could have been better? What did you enjoy about it? And do you have any recommendations for other people who you feel would suit this program? So it automatically sends them an email. I think I love the power of what's that? Like having people bring other people on. So I forget what it is. Word of mouth for me. I really enjoy that, because if you're a great person and you come on, you're going to know other great people who need to be showcased and highlighted. And I absolutely love highlighting other people and showcasing what they are, what they're doing, and just kind of going with the flow. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And just following just a little tiny bit of like to keep me reined in, because ADD is just beautiful. It can just go everywhere, and then we'll have a 5-hour call, which it works. But some people might want to listen to a condensed version of it. So
right, yeah. You said you were going to bring up the thing around those credentials as well, and then we are getting ready to wind down very shortly. But
yeah. So I graduated high school. I was the first one in our family to graduate high school. I never really was geared towards going to college or anything. I didn't. It wasn't my thing. But what I truly feel, it isn't the plaque on the wall that defines the person. It's just that's how good their memory is. That's how much either they're in debt or they had to spend on education. Everything that you need to learn, or anything, you can look it up now. There's YouTube videos. You can find anything for free. So you don't need to be certified in order to educate yourself. And I really think it's a personal responsibility of whoever it is. If you want to be an expert in podcast, or if you want to be an expert in photography, you go do that and you find out what it is that interests you. And I call it follow the dopamine. That's what I do. I follow the dopamine, what interests me. So certificates on the wall, wonderful, but I can't see that when we're on a podcast. And how am I going to tell somebody that's what you have? What have you done in the school of life. I've been to the school of life. I've graduated with the school of life, and I'm still going. And I still think that personal experience is key, and that's what makes us human. So, yeah, certificates are wonderful, but that's not how I don't live my life by it. So.
No, that makes a lot of sense. The other question I was going to get to just, and then there's a question I ask everybody at the end of just about all my podcasts, but the one I wanted to get to before getting off is, how much do you think that we as creatives know enough about the business side of things? Because that is something that I sometimes get frustrated by, because a lot of times we were talking about worth earlier, we don't even know our own business worth and all in that space. So I was just wondering, I'll start with you, Jazzy, as to how much is that the conversation you have to have with yourself and all of that? Because I sometimes think that we don't necessarily charge what we are worth in that sense and everything, in terms of like when it's being a chance to be a public speaker, not so much a speaker on a podcast, but like a public speaker, or even sometimes when we are offering services. And I did hear that you offering services and everything, but I know a lot of folks are intimidated by not wanting to charge enough and everything in that line. But I just wondered your take on that. And I'd love to hear from Pamela and Deborah as well.
So I think at the end of the day, for me, it's how much do I want to be involved in this project, and how much do I not want to be involved in this project. So if I, have a person who's interested in working with me, but I really can tell off the rip that they're not going to be a good fit for the network, then I'm going to give them my highest price. And if they're willing to pay that, then I have to, have a conversation with myself. It's like, okay, do I really just want to take their money? But most of the time, in my experience, they end up saying, oh, no, that's way too much. I'm like, okay, well, I'm sorry it didn't work out for you. You know what I mean? Whatever the case. And I just kind of let them go. Now, if it's a person who I really, really do want to work for it, then I have been prone to making it affordable for them. And, that looks like you give them kind of like, I usually do like maybe $100 less than I would typically charge, see how they feel about that. And then I'm able to say, all right, we can do 50% up front, and then 50% a little bit later. If I really want to work with that person. Now, when it comes to like hosting events and stuff like that, I'm going to be honest, like sometimes it's just a concert I really want to go to. I really want to be a part of. I really want to meet that artist backstage and hang out with them and kick it. So like I'll throw out, something that says like $300 for hosting. But then you have to also understand your market, because I'm in Rochester, New York. We're a place where there's been one hip hop radio station for 44 years. And then 3 years ago, a new hip hop station came to play. So now they're at this new radio station. These are people fresh out of high school, very, very hungry. They'll go out and host something for $50 and a bottle. You know what I mean? So you have this competition now. So you have to kind of like read that too. Like, all right, I come into this space, the 20-year veteran. I come from a different city. I'm not from this area. It's very localized and stuff like that. So I have to at least establish myself, a bit above people who just got the microphone yesterday. You know what I mean? So you have to at least establish yourself. But if it's somebody that I really, really want to work with, I'll say, okay, look, this is my price. I'm going to do it for you for this, as long as we can, let's connect it to a charity, which we've done. And, make it make sense. So it's not like I need to get all this money, but I want to make sure that somebody else is being helped out of the thing that we're doing. So I think over the years, and I'll just wrap up with this, yesterday's price is not today's price.
Right. That is very true. Yeah, those prices do have to change, and sometimes you got to adjust those prices based on the experience, and there's no doubt about that. What about you, Pamela? I know that there's sometimes that even as an author, and even when you're dealing with the authors, that sometimes they are intimidated by the different fees that you might be charging as well. So how do you deal with the whole notion of feeling that you are charging the right amount?
Well, I love yesterday's price is not today's price. I think that's my anthem going forward.
Yes.
In terms of the podcast, as long as the author can send me 2 copies of their books, one for me to read prior to the interview, and the other copy is to give away as a competition prize. That's the only criteria. They just need to bring their energy and give me their time. And I'm not short of books. People, this is the stat for part season 5 of the podcast, which I will start interviewing for in February, and I do it for the love of it. I like the idea that the my sponsor will also supply teas to guests who've been on the show, and they will also supply teas to competition winners as well. So you could imagine my house is stacked with boxes of teas at the moment. But I am in a clubhouse room, so that's how you found me, Mark. So I am hoping to look towards monetizing the podcast at some stage. So I'm at a position now where I'm just doing my own research, and in a place where I'm just learning about this whole podcast thing. Because I mean, I'm team. In terms of microphones, I've got one that I particularly like, but is that the best for me to do what I want to do going forward? I don't know. So at the moment, when it comes to the podcast, I'm just learning. I'm often asked to speak on mainly online, which is good. But going forward, I know that there are paid opportunities coming up. And to be honest with you, I just want to be looked after. I was on a major network as part of a book club a couple of years ago, and I loved the idea that they picked me up from home. I was chauffeur driven to the studio. I was fed and watered while I was there. I did my bit, and then they popped me back into a chauffeur-driven car and driven home. So it's, for me, going forward, that's how I want to be treated. So again, I've been invited to a couple of things, and we're still in discussions about how I would travel, how would I get there. Are you going to pay for me to, sit in economy, or are we talking business class? There are a couple of major festivals that I would like to go to, one in Jamaica, and I'm building up to asking my sponsors whether they will sponsor me, because they're getting free advertisement, multiple times a week. Are they are they able to fly me to Jamaica to take part in that particular book festival? So they're the kind of discussions that I'm having. Or I was nominated for a couple of awards last year, and with the cost of living crisis, I couldn't afford to go. And I asked my sponsors, and they were delighted. They sent me. And they paid for my husband to go as well. So again, I'm being a bit more bolder about what I want from it. And it's not necessarily money, because the experience and the exposure of going to these award ceremonies means that I'm connecting with more people who may be interested in the podcast, or how I came about getting sponsorship for the podcast. So I'm very much at the early stages. March this year will be 2 years since having the podcast. So I'm eager to take up the opportunity to have a consultation with Jazzy T about where to go with it next, and how would I get my podcast onto her network. And Deborah, an open invitation to you to come on my podcast and talk about your journey and your books also.
Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's something we got to do more of. And I know that I sometimes say that I'm going to do it. And sometimes I remember to do it. Sometimes I don't. But I do know that podcasters in general do need to try to get those endorsements from their guests and things along those lines. Because I think as a general rule, we don't do enough of that, and all in that space. And that way folks can build up and learn even more about your reputation, and all in that space. And I've gotten some actually good reviews in terms of letters from folks that after they've been on, whether it's in private chats or in actual physical emails, and even in some cases a letter. And actually one time a person actually wrote a book based on the podcast that we did, because it was one of my artist friends, and he loved the interview so much that he called me up one day and was like, hey, can I turn that into a book if I give you credit for the interview and the podcast? I was like, sure, as long as the name is in there, and that's another form of advertising. So Van Dorn Hennet did that, I think it was about 1.5 years ago, and it was a whole conversation around art, the importance of art, and a number of other things that were featured in that book that he has, and all in those lines. Deborah, I know we're getting ready to wrap it up, because it's been a fun conversation. I always enjoy these conversations. They go by much too fast and all of that, but definitely wanted you to answer that question around understanding your worth. But the other thing, and I wanted to go round table with you three ladies and everything, but if you can tell folks, one, answer that question, Deborah, but everybody, if you want to tell folks how they can reach you, your social media stuff and all of that. And the whole network is about, it's a global network. So we heard in like 150 or something like that countries around the world at different times and all of that. So I am all about with everything that y'all just mentioned in terms of all the problems going on in the world. I'm all about peace and things in that space of like peace and wellness and positivity, more importantly, positivity. So any message of positivity that you would like to give our global community, I would love to hear that from you. So,
Sure. Yeah. So for me, I'm an artist and a poet, and and I do Reiki sessions and all that kind of stuff. And it was very difficult at the start to ask for what I know I'm worth. But then I realized that if when I say my baseline price, and if it's too much for them, then they're just not the right customer for me. Because there are people that will see my value, and if I keep on if I devalue my art or what I do, because it was a lifetime of learning to do that art. It wasn't just like, it's not just now. You're not paying just for a finished product. You're paying for what I put into it, the lessons, all that. So if it's too high of a price for them speaking art or even just the sessions that I offer, then it's just not the right customer. And there are different, like, I love giving it away too. So I love being able to offer assistance when I can. But that for me, but that's probably why I'm not very very apt in the business place, because I love to give it. I love giving it away. Just like Pamela was saying about, it's for the joy of giving. So I love the podcast I do. I don't think I'd ever charge people. I love the idea about providing a book for me to read and then somebody is giving a book away. I think that is a really great incentive for listeners to be able to listen. So for me, I'm not quite as business minded as some, and I think that's where having a team and outsourcing what I'm not good at and being on camera and talking, interviewing, that's what I'm good at. So really monetizing, I guess, on what I'm good at, follow that dopamine, what I'm good at, do that, and then outsourcing what editing and that kind of stuff, what I really don't really want to do. But if somebody else loves to do it and they can do it in 30 minutes rather than me procrastinating and taking a week to do it, I'd rather just get it done. So the business side of it, I probably need some work on it, but I can outsource that.
Yep. And how can folks reach you, and any word of positivity that you would love to spread to the world, Deborah, and everything? If you want to drop a poem, since you've mentioned being a poet at least 2 or 3 times, we would love to hear the
I
poem
would
as well.
love to read a poem. I would love to. So you can reach me on the Healing Heartland Experience. It's on Instagram. HART is because art is the main focus on that, and how I healed from art. You can reach that on Facebook and on Instagram. And yeah, no, poetry is my jam. I love it. So I'll read a poem about being a writer. And here we go. It's the quote is, "We are writers, my love. We don't cry. We bleed on paper." A teardrop dripped down and landed with a plop onto my paper. It made my ink bleed out loud with the click of the pen. I was writing a sad, sad tune. I'm not sure how it started. You might say it was a tune so true. Truth to be shown and true to express. My feelings so true, so deep. Secrets to keep. Writing flowing just like a feeling so deep, just like a stream. On the surface, writing will not do. To the depths of my soul, I will always go. That's what she said. So I let my ink bleed onto this paper so white and true, the sacrifice so bright and red, to be given to the next writer, to the next baton, to be the light to read on, to be bled on, to be led on. To the blood of the pen I do write, bled from my tears and fears and heartaches and heart drops. I write to thee, some may say from a selfish decree. I release the pain, the sting, and the strain held from deep within my soul. The paper to take the toll, the real star of the show. Pointed fingers, painted inkwells, releasing letters to all high above, brightly shining, peaceful as a dove. You help me climb from the depths within of hell's gated no more. You paper, you ink opened that door and released me from the inner prison. My heart wells spilled your ink. You sacrificed yourself unselfishly. I honor thee, paper and pen, till we meet again. P.S. I love you. That was the piece that I wrote about the power of paper to pen, the power of expressing yourself and using art to be able to heal. And I think a lot of people, I know myself, need that that free expression of self.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Hey, Jazzy T, if you'll tell folks once again how they can reach you, and if you got any creative things that you want to share as well, and also any message of positivity.
All right. Well, I just wanted to share with Deborah. I wrote down a couple of things that you said because I just love them, and I just wanted to share with you what I found very helpful. The cute side of crazy. I love that phrase. That's amazing. It happened for me. You never said it happened to me. You said it happened for me. And then you also said follow the dopamine. That's the name of a show right there. I could see that as a creator, like maybe on Instagram or something, having a series about following the dopamine. So I just wanted to give you that because I found those to be very exciting.
Thank you.
So you can find me first on the radio at WDKX.com. I work in Rochester, New York. It's hip hop, Rochester's best ride home, 2 to 6 p.m. on the weekdays. I can be found on Instagram at Jazzy T on air, on Facebook at Jazzy T Williams, or follow the Jazzcast Pros Facebook business page. I upload reels, 60-second podcast tips, things that can help you along your journey. If you would like to listen to any of our shows, we have a channel on Apple Podcasts called Jazzcast Pros. You can also just go to jazzcastpros.com, connect with me there. There's a button there if you would like to submit an application to join the network. And we are also, accepting a couple more people. Once I get to 10, I'm not going to be able to fully produce and edit. But right now we do have a couple openings to start new podcasts. Or if you just need some a la carte help with, say you want to change your cover art, or you need help, writing some show notes, or, just want some help with editing, that's something that I can do a la carte as well. But if you simply want to join the network, all we pretty much need is a quick form, your RSS feed, and to ensure that you align with the mission of Jazzcast Pros, which is to educate, empower, and inspire women and people of color. Thank you very much. I do have one quote. Build your own dreams, or you will end up building someone else's.
Powerful and very true. Yeah, we got to build your own dreams because other folks will definitely have you trying to build theirs. There's no doubt about that. I've actually fallen into those traps a couple of times. You got to be very careful about those traps because they can be some serious traps to get into. Pamela, if you want to definitely tell folks how they can reach you, your podcast, as well as a word of positivity. And I'm not going to let you off the hook. If you want to give us just a little bit of a passage from one of the books, we'd love to hear that as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, the books are right here. The first one is called Loving the Brothers. That's part 1. The second one is called Loving the Sisters. And they're available in the States as well, which is wonderful. Online at Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, and Books A Million, and obviously Amazon, but there are alternatives. So I'm really glad to know that they're there and available online. I have to say the hardcover is absolutely lush. If you when they're on sale, then they get them during the sale because that's really good. My podcast is called the Author to Author podcast. It's available on 13 streaming platforms, including Amazon Music, Audible, and Spotify. I am 43 episodes in now and absolutely loving it. Love the idea that I've traveled so far in the last 2 years. It was nominated for a Black Podcast Award, so that was really good. And I'm just loving the journey that I'm on at the minute. You could find me on Instagram. That's my main place, at Loving the Author. And you can find out what I've been up to, what's happening with the podcast, as well as I like to bring my audience along with me in terms of the fiction that I write. So they're up to date on who my new characters are and what my books are all about. All of my interviews are on Linktree at Linktree Pamela.r.haynes, so you can look up my previous interviews as well. And I'll just have a quick dip into chapter 1 of Loving the Brothers. And this character, her name is Patty. I just about catch the 5:10 p.m. train from Camden Overground to Stratford Station. Given that the rush hour was in full effect, I'm prepared to stand all the way until a young brother motions me to take his seat. I didn't argue with him because my feet were killing me from wearing heels at the office all day. Thank you, I say with a smile, and I hurry awkwardly to trade places with him. He stands over me, smiling back, and oh my dear Lord, he has such a sassy smile. All of a sudden, I feel heat rising and flooding my face. Am I blushing or is it another hot flush? It's difficult to tell at my age. I am 45 years old, perimenopausal, and the hot flushes are visiting me so frequently, it's like having my own personal summers, regardless of what season we're in. Whatever it is, I tell myself to calm down. Beads of sweat form on my brow as I frantically look through my huge messenger bag for my handheld electric fan. All the time, this brother was observing me as if I was his entertainment. I couldn't find my fan, which I think I must have left in my clutch bag, the one I'd used the previous weekend when I attended a fundraiser at Stoke Newington Town Hall. The event was to raise money for the Amorose Trust to support people living with chronic kidney disease. I couldn't find my fan, so I ended up fanning myself with the day's Metro newspaper that I'd picked up from the station on my way to work. I planned on completing the Sudoku quiz during my break, but I ended up working through my lunch. That's it so far.
That was amazing. That was great. I definitely was enjoying that. Any words of encouragement that you wanted to share to the global community as well? And then we'll get ready to get on out of here.
I mean, I think as a 50-plus woman that's had to reinvent herself, I would say my favorite catchphrase is to change some things in life, you have to change some things in life. So you can continue down a particular course, but if you're unhappy, then just change it and do something different.
That makes a lot of sense. I can definitely relate to that. One of my business partners would probably be having a little bit of a fit if I didn't mention something that we've been involved in, and it's tied in to something that Jazzy's been doing because it's something similar. But me and Nicole Maxwell have formed something called Max Distro, and you can actually go to the Max Distro store, and part of that is helping podcasters get to live streams and live streams get to podcasts, and all in that space, because she's found something like 50 something platforms or something along those lines. So I have to make a mention of that. Otherwise, Nicole will probably give me a call and be like, Mark, you did a whole podcast. You didn't mention it at all. And all in that thing. So you go to maxdistro.live. You'll actually see that we have a blog that talks about different things on there. I think we've got 4 posts on there. And if you go to maxdistro.store, you can actually find some swag. Yes, we have some swag. So we've got cups, some shirts, and some other things. So if you want to go there and order it, we will not complain about that in the least bit whatsoever. And of course, you are on Pod TV, and you can go to podtv.tv and see all kinds of amazing things, including this week, the Black and All in That Space, because that's going on for a whole week and all in that way. So there's all kinds of programming, and we've discovered the wonders of public domain. So we're also showing some old movies and some old TV shows. So we've got a whole division of channels that also show those on a regular basis as well. So we've actually dug up and found some of those that are able to be shown because they're in that public domain. So we found them and we're airing them in that space. And that definitely have found some cute ones, including one that dealt with Santa Claus. And I believe it was some aliens that we were airing during the holiday season, and all in that space. But I'm going to let y'all check out another associate advertisement, and they were actually in that voiceover field, and that's what we're going to use to get on out of here. So we're going to hear from Karen Bradford and some of what she does in the voiceover space. And I can tell all three of you ladies, I hope that you will make a return trip to this show and to this network. We always love having return guests, and I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with the three of you, and hope that you will make a return trip at some time or another.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
One quick 30-second poem that I wrote about following the dopamine. Is that okay to end on that?
Yes, go ahead. We'll do the commercial after you do the poem.
Following the dopamine, because I'm dopamine, not the kind you smoke. I mean, the kind that got up and completed a task on time. I mean, yeah, just like that. You know, I meant it when I sent it that message on that app, you mean? I did it. I follow the dopamine trail that allows me to get up off my ass, sit up on stage and smile and spit on the mic. I don't spit on mics. I mean, I spit my piece at the mic. It's because I'm dope like that. I mean.
Hey.
Love that. What a great
that.
thing to end. And we'll go with the voiceover ad as well, but that's what I'm going to hit the end broadcast with. But I definitely love that also. Deborah, great job. Also enjoyed the other guests as well. So Jazzy and Pamela, who just left already, but we're going to get on out of here. Thanks again, and hope to see y'all both in Clubhouse as well as possibly back here on Pod TV in the near future.
The only trick you need to save time and money is to shop at Aldi. Aldi. Shop differently. Limitless length plus volume. Sensational from every angle. New Lash Sensational Sky High Mascara. Only from Maybelline, New York. Everything that touches your baby should be this comforting. Pampers Swaddlers. The #1 choice of hospitals is 2 times softer. All right, Trivago. Find me a hotel somewhere in Thailand where I can wake up with a view of the ocean. Awesome. The future. It's impossible to see. And when it's finally here, it might not be what you'd expect. It might just be better. Introducing Luxury Electric. Introducing Lucid Air. We're for those who love to discover, who don't need to travel to find something new, and who know when you spend less, you can discover even more at TJ Maxx and Marshalls. Smooth, velvety chocolate wrapped in precious gold. Ferrero Rocher.